All right, my next guest is Athena Desai, holistic trauma specialist and spiritual coach. Athena, you work a lot with the veteran community, helping guys with PTSD. Been doing that for about 12 years. You're kind of in the psychedelic acupuncture. You're a musician. You're a former NPR star. I really appreciate you joining me today. I can't wait to have this conversation and kind of chat about your experiences with working with veterans and psychedelics and everything you're into. So thank you so much. If you would like to kind of give a quick introduction of yourself, that would be great.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. And you covered a lot. Yeah. I used to be a radio journalist. That was my first career out of the gate. And during that time, 9/11 happened, and I was at NPR in Washington, and it had a huge, huge impact on me. And not only woke up more of my warrior spirit, but also made me question how we were treating veterans and how we were doing on the healing front, considering we were asking them to go into war again. So, yeah, I got really sick over that time in news, and Chinese medicine saved my life. And I decided to study it and study balance and flow and all the great things that it has to offer.
So how'd you get into radio?
Oh, man, sort of by divine accident. So I've been a musician pretty much my whole life. I've sang and played multiple instruments and just always loved it. And my parents sort of only listened to NPR, and we were only allowed to watch PBS for like the first 11 years or something. It was a bit of a nerdy beginning, but also kind of wonderful. And I was in my college career development office, maybe senior year, and flipping through a bunch of internship applications. And there was one for NPR, and I was like, sold. I actually didn't get in the first time. And that was the perfect invitation for me to just keep banging at the door. That was kind of my MO at that point. I was like, oh, no, I'm going to turn that into a yes. So I just kept going until they said yes.
Did you just keep banging at the door and say, put me on the radio, give you a mic and just work it out?
Kind of. I mean, they were lucky. I was a musician and a writer, and I was an anthropology major. So I had been studying people and what we do and why we do it for a while at that point. And yeah, I mean, it's on-the-job training. I mean, there were no real introductions or warnings. You kind of drop in the first day and set off running, and I couldn't get enough of it. I absolutely adored it.
So were you in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So on 9/11, you're working there. What was your first assignment after 9/11 happened or during 9/11? Do you remember?
Well, at that time, I had just started working on Weekend Edition Saturday as a production assistant, and I had been on the editorial side on the national desk before that. And I mean, I'm sure you can remember it was chaos, and we were trying to figure out what was happening. So that whole week was a blur, but I do distinctly remember a moment of grieving and silence that we had for anyone in the building who wanted to touch in with that. And I just lost it. Like, I was sobbing and felt the deepest sorrow that I had touched in with about the fact that this was my home and my country, and I had no idea what was going to happen next.
Yeah, it was. At that time, I was in the National Guard. And so, I was just like hanging out down in the Bay Area, and that happened. And it immediately was like, oh, you already knew you were going to war. It was right away. And I mean, it took a couple of years, and, we went to Iraq, and that's a whole nother story. That's where I wound up. And I was like, wait. But yeah, that was a wake-up call for everybody. So how did you get into freaking psychedelics and healing?
Yeah, I started taking psychedelics when I was 14. So that's now 35 years ago. I was a pretty angry and curious teenager. And now I get how much I was self-medicating at that time, but also was having a spiritual awakening that I was fairly conscious of. I mean, as conscious as you can be when you're 14, and just kept going. I mean, it fed me so, so much. And it was always such a profoundly spiritual experience, particularly with psychedelic medicine. I smoked a lot of marijuana as well. And a lot of that was numbing out, not to diminish her medicine at all, because she's an amazing, profound medicine too. But yeah, it's just all stayed with me over the years. A few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I started wanting to turn more towards shamanic study with indigenous Meso and South American cultures, Native American cultures. So I started doing more in earnest and sitting with sort of bigger medicine, for lack of a better word, and getting teachers and creating my own study and being in closer relationship with the medicines.
Yeah, I'm fairly new to the psychedelic game. My first real experience was in December of last year. It was pretty profound. I hadn't done any mushrooms. I'd smoked some marijuana, not spiritually, just for the hell of it. And yeah, what a wake up call that was. I mean, I dealt with quite a bit of like PTSD, anxiety, depression, stuff everybody deals with. But holy crap, I'd heard about it and how helpful it could be, but I mean, it changed my life. So the guys who are coming to you, like, how do you kind of start out working with them? And is it just like an all encompassing, you do acupuncture, and what other kind of stuff do you do? I assume you're not doing a ton of ayahuasca.
No, yeah, exactly. There are a number of ways that I work with people. So I was working with acupuncture as sort of my primary medicine, which is also shamanic medicine, depending on how you do it, for quite some time. I closed my physical office. So now I'm doing a bit more remote work. I do prep and integration coaching. I've done some guidance around microdosing. And really, the whole thing for me that the shamanic lens affords us, I think, is getting into sacred relationship with the medicines, but also with the universe, right? And that's kind of the point. So I do a lot of counseling and guidance around that. But that's not necessarily how people come in, right? They don't necessarily come and say, you know what, I'm addicted to cigarettes and I'd rather have a sacred relationship with tobacco. They often come in, just with what is going on in their lives. And we can start wherever you are. Sometimes it's back pain. Sometimes it's chronic injury. Sometimes it's nightmares. Like, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just a door to open.
Are most of the people that are coming to you, like, have they tried any of these modalities, or are most of them just coming in like, hey, I hear you can kind of help me out, and what do you got to offer? And what's kind of the first step you would take with somebody who's, dealing with PTSD, for example, like they get hold of you, and how do you start guiding them down that healing journey?
I'm a big fan of questions, right? And so the first thing that I need to do is to be listening for where they are, what's really happening. And again, even if you have a physical problem, that can easily just be a flag, a doorway, a message about some other soul level, spirit level, psycho-emotional stuff that's going on, right? So once I get a sense of where that person is and what they're curious about, right? I always recommend people follow their nose. We often have intuitions about what we should be doing or the questions we should be asking. Then I can kind of tease out, well, it sounds like, an experience with this medicine might really help you. And this is why. This is sort of how this medicine shows up, and the personality that it has, and the invitations that it brings you. Or, all of us need some daily practice. And I like making spirituality, shamanism, and ritualism very practical. So I'll help people come up with sort of bespoke, tailored rituals for themselves and practices so that they can really just be changing the vibe that they're living in. That's usually what our problems are asking us to do, right? Is to live differently in some way. So
You start out with any breath work or meditation or any of those type of things? Because I mean, I know those are some pretty powerful tools to do on your own, but me, I'm like, I never have time to do the breath work. I want to do it, and I'm just so busy. I know it doesn't take that long, but what are some of those first practices people can do if they haven't experienced any of this stuff?
I love starting with breathing and very often talk about meditation. Meditation can feel really overwhelming and intimidating to a lot of people. And I think it's because in this culture, we have an idea that it has to accomplish something as it's happening. I mean, side note, it is, but I think of it as training, right? So you don't have to be blissed out every time you meditate. It's actually more about the practice. And if you're alive, you have access to your breathing and some awareness about it. So that is a great place to start. If they're approaching medicine, I often start with some suggestions about how to get closer to the consciousness of the medicine. So building an altar or adding some kind of offering to your altar to the medicine. Start having conversations with the medicine, asking your questions, cultivate listening. That's a big thing that's been coming up for me lately because I find that it takes a certain presence and stillness and attunement to be able to hear what voice is coming from where. I mean, we have plenty of them ourselves, right? And the medicine will absolutely speak to us through our hearts and through our silence.
Yeah. What type of medicines are you kind of generally working with guys? Is it psilocybin or is it, MDMA or ayahuasca?
I like supporting people around their experiences with mushrooms and wachuma. And a lot of people go on retreat and drink aya.
Yeah.
And then tobacco is a huge medicine for me. I was very addicted to him in my youth, and I'm so happy to have a more sacred relationship with him now. So that's another one that I work with a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I've never actually done a heroic dose of mushrooms in the talks to do it. But I'm very curious, like, to see the difference between a ayahuasca, which I've done 12 times now, and psilocybin, if it's the same type of journey. You've done both of them, obviously. Like, what's your experience between the two? Are they similar or is it completely separate?
Well, I think they're joined in the way that you show up with your stuff. They're both very powerful with shadow work, right? So helping you enter into what is not conscious for you and what's in your blind spots and what really needs a lot more love and attention and healing. But I find their personalities very different. Mushrooms, they're called los niños, right? The children or the sacred children, los niños sagrados, in Meso and South American traditions. And I do find them pretty mischievous. They're the gateway openers and the tricksters. And even in the darkest of places and journeys with them, they always find a way to fuck my shit up and make me derail my plans and, just have such profound wisdom. But the way that they deliver it can often be very sort of effervescent and childlike. And then I have less experience with, but I mean, it's hard to not bow to her fierceness. I mean, she teaches me so much about the ultimate intense power of the feminine. And she is more like she is in nature, right? In terms of vines and the whole snake spirit that's part of her sort of avatar here. I'm astonished at her range. I think she can be absolutely brutal and so incredibly gentle. And yeah, I mean, I think in Western culture, it's hard to imagine the value of taking stuff from the root and getting it the fuck out, right? But we are so served by that process. So
Yeah, she's pretty wild. I mean, I've had the most incredible loving experience and the most horrific, scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, she brings it all to you. You never know what you're going to get. You go on with your intention, like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this, and good luck. Like, yeah, it's pretty wild. What?
hard to
So,
hear.
yeah. So I am very curious in mushrooms and seeing like the difference in that. You know, I've had some mischievous ayahuasca experiences too, where it's like, what the hell is this? You know, and going to some weird dimensions. Not everybody has those experiences, but I have them quite often. You know, how did you worked with the Wounded Warrior Project? And you know, I know a little bit about them, but not really. Like, what kind of stuff are they doing, and how are you helping them out?
So there's two projects that I work with. One I have a lot more experience with, which is Veterans Yoga Project. And they give free training and lessons to veterans and first responders in trauma-informed, veteran-specific yoga. So I was the state director for them in Massachusetts for a year, and I taught for them for some years. And I helped to start a program at Home Base, which is a joint MGH and Red Sox Foundation clinic for invisible wounds of war. So TBI, PTS. Unbelievable experience. Really spoiled me. That's kind of the only way that I want to teach yoga now is to veterans, mostly men. There were definitely some female veterans, but I love being in that space with people who maybe not so familiar with yoga, but are in the process of re-inhabiting their bodies and learning what their yeses and nos are, and you know, trying to live with and transform chronic pain. Yoga is incredible at working on all the levels. It's one of the things I love about Eastern medicine. So you're in your body and you're working with your breath, but it is in service of your ultimate truth. And you're training your mind in that process to also be servant to that. So we love that. And then I'm also an ambassador for Heroic Hearts Project, and they are about bringing veterans to alternative psychedelic therapies for PTS. So
Have you gone to any of their retreats?
we have not.
No. Gotta sign up. Yeah, I've reached out to them a little bit, Jesse Gold, and you know, apparently they're bringing out a place. I live in Southern Oregon, and there's a place here in Ashland. I guess they're going to be bringing it out to Oregon since it's quasi legal out here. I'm interested to see what they're going to do, and I'm going to be popping in there and checking it out. It's wild, but it definitely helps people. I mean, I've seen veterans and just anybody. I mean, just this last week being there, it was crazy the amount of trauma that people are dealing with and healing. But you know, it's an experience that if you're not familiar with, going into a group of 90 people all dealing with trauma at the same time, it could be a shocker.
So much energy. Yeah.
Yeah. They had a shaman this week, Taita Juanito. He's a super legit dude. And yeah, he brings the energy. And but a lot of healing was done this week down there. And so highly recommend if you're a veteran or anybody who's dealing with a lot of stuff and you haven't looked into ayahuasca or any of these other modalities, do it, please. It's worth it. And it can be scary, but it's worth it.
Can be scary. It can even be a little traumatic or a lot traumatic. And that's why who you're doing it with, the context in which you're stepping into the portal of the medicine, the process, right? The preparation, being there, the integration, all of that is paramount. It's not just the big show. I mean, I think a lot of people orient towards the ceremony itself and forget or don't realize that the real work is what we do in our sovereignty with our agency, like taking the wisdom that was illuminated for us with the medicine and then doing the work of actually and walking forward with what we've learned. So it's a
What do you
long.
think? Yeah, it is. What do you think about the information that you get, like in the downloads? I don't know if you've gotten many of those, but I mean, I get some information that's just like, it's wild. And you're like, I mean, I have a story that I'm still mind blown over this weekend. So, and I'm going to tell it to you because why not? So I'm in the medicine. It's a Thursday night. It's a Yahe night, which is an extremely strong ayahuasca medicine. It has the 5-MeO DMT in it. And so back in a past life, like 15 years ago, I was married and had, my ex, his sister was killed in a car accident. And which she was 14 years old. And so we did this medicine, and I'm sitting by the fire the other night on Thursday, and I look over and she's sitting next to me. Like, Chantel, like it was wild. And so she didn't say anything. She's just sitting there. She's older, not 14, but I knew it was her. And all of a sudden, she's gone, and I was like, that was weird. I haven't even really thought about her in a long time. And so last night on my way home, or yesterday morning, I texted her mom, which I talked to very seldomly, and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I saw Chantel last night and she was all grown up and everything. And yesterday was her birthday. And I had no idea. And so I sent that message to her mom, and I could imagine receiving a random message from somebody, it was wild. But I mean, it's just things like that happen that you can't explain to people. Like the amount of healing, you're not just healing yourself, you are healing other people around you. And her mom was very appreciative of that message on her birthday, her daughter's birthday, that, it's been 20 years. So I don't know, just a story that I felt like I should share with people, because it's wild. Like what the hell is going on? Like, we are definitely interacting with things that in the spiritual world that we have very little understanding of. I'm trying to learn more. I've probably got another 20 or 30, 40 experiences before I start getting a little bit of understanding of this stuff, but it's definitely healing, Have you had any weird experiences like that?
Yeah, I just do want to say, though, that it is pretty natural in that space where we're expanding our entire energetic field into other realms of the universe, right? Where time isn't necessarily experienced in a linear way.
Mm-hmm.
So people talk a lot about connecting with those who have passed over, and it's pretty profound, right? I'm not sure if I have any of those in my background that I can draw up as a story right now, but I hear it all the time for sure in coaching. And yeah, I think it's, as you said, even if you're not 30 years or 30 experiences in, the fact that it's healing is obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to sort of keep unfolding. You made the choice to share it with her mom, which is amazing and such a gift. And yeah, I think the more that we talk about it and the more that we engage with it, the more the ripples of the healing just kind of keep spreading out.
Yeah, I'm just going to read what I wrote to her because it was totally random. I just wrote, hello, I'm just wrapping up another trip to Rhythmia in Costa Rica. I wanted to let you know. While on Yahe Ayahuasca last night, Chantel came to me and sat next to me by the fire while I was deep in the medicine. She didn't stay very long or say anything, but it was 100%. She was grown up and beautiful. I just wanted to let you know. Her mom responded, I'm so happy for you and that Chantel visited you. Great story to hear, especially since today is her birthday. Thank you for sharing. I had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
that's to receive a message like that. Like, I mean, I know it's just a higher power. It's definitely a gift from God, in my opinion, and um, that's just a little tiny experience of the types of things that I've had happen over these experiences. And, I tell people I can't recommend this enough. I mean, and it's not easy, like the stuff I heard going on in that place, people just going through it, but you have to go through it to get to the other side, and
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And the medicine communicates in very interesting ways, right? And images are definitely one of those ways, just the reminders that everything is still connected. I had an experience after an Aya ceremony where I was dieting the plant Marosa as well, who heals a lot of heartbreak. And I thought I had healed the heartbreak from this particular profound relationship, but well, it all came up in that ceremony for sure. When I was done with the ceremony, the medicine showed me this like movie of the person that I had lost. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, why are you showing me this? I just spent hours in there sort of hawking it all up and sobbing it out. And I got to talk to my teacher the next day, and she said, yeah, you don't have to stop loving him. You're just letting go of the attachment. And that's why they showed you, right? What they showed you. And I was like, yep, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it totally does. Yeah. I mean, most of the experiences that I've had have been like, I've dealt with a lot of different things. The medicine shows you like, yeah, those things happen to you, but that's not who you are. And they don't have to define you for the rest of your life.
100%. And there is medicine in them. I think that's the most gratifying thing that I've learned about trauma over the years is there's actually medicine in the wounds. And you do have to take the time and courageously step into asking the questions and looking in the dark corners in order to find the medicine in it. It really just becomes poison if you let it fester and you don't give it the attention and the love that it needs. But the medicine that comes out of it, as you are doing with your podcast and your life, and so many people out there doing that, right? It's big.
Yeah.
It's
But
infinite.
I'm loving it. I'm just trying to spread the word. I'm not making a penny off of this thing, and I don't care. It costs me money, but I'm like, I just want people to know like how healing some of this stuff can be, but you have to be open to it, and she definitely has a way of cracking people. Like one of my buddies, he went down there with me and he went into it with this great, like, let's try this, and he hasn't had, everybody has their trauma and stuff like that, but he hasn't, he's not some combat vet with no legs or anything like that, just a regular dude, but he was very resistant to it, resistant. And man, he went through all the ceremonies and was just kind of like, yeah, this is bullshit. And then we closed the ceremony with breath work. It just freaking ripped him apart, man. He came out of that like just sobbing and like he got his miracle, like, so you never know when it's going to hit you, but just because you're not feeling it right away doesn't mean it's not working on something in you. Um,
Such a great thing to remind people of. I just had that conversation with my teacher recently. You may not feel what is happening, but that doesn't mean that it's not working. And also, it's such an interesting inquiry into how much does our resistance stand in the way of our expansion? Because all of this is for our life, right? But you can be served an entire cup, multiple full cups of that medicine, which is absolutely wired to break you all the way open and feel nothing
yeah.
and feel like you're going through nothing. And I think a lot of that is this question, like, how open are you to going there? And maybe he needed those however many ceremonies before the breathwork to sort of
Or I'm like, come on, man, just have a couple more cups. It'll get to you. But Now he's asking for all the playlists and everything. So it got him.
Funny that it can seem like an absolute, just impenetrable wall.
Yeah.
And then who knows? It's like a feather. It's like
Yeah.
a hair that might actually open the door. And yeah, I love that you can just keep going. You don't ever have
Yeah.
to look. You don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible stuff. So, so like, people who want to work with you, like how do they get a hold of you? How do they start that process with you?
Instagram is a great place to send me a DM. My contact information is actually on my website for Soulful Healing and Counsel. It's COUNCIL, just to remind me of the spirit teams that help me do any of this stuff, help us live mindfully. But yeah, I mean, I like to, because this even happened with just acupuncture. People aren't necessarily sure where to start or if what they have rises to the level of an inquiry. But I personally think everything's an inquiry. I mean, you could even send a message that was like, hey, I have absolutely no idea why I'm messaging you. I just connected to something that you were saying or that's in your feed. And I'd love to have a conversation. Can start there. I'm doing a lot of remote work these days with coaching, so it makes me more available.
How often do you work with your clients?
It depends on what they need. Everyone's different, right? I mean, some people come in and they're very focused. I would say that's fewer people, but they've been in the game and they already know what they want to work on. So that might actually be less frequently than maybe that's once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or you just kind of need a tune up. But on the other end of the spectrum, that's a little more about what I see. You're really going through something and you need a lot of support. And I would say for any of the holistic modalities and also our practices, which we really need to support us, you're looking at changing some pretty big things, right? Your ways of behaving, your mindset, your wavelengths and vibes, right? I mean, these things take time. So if you're going through something intense and acute, I always recommend doing like every week for a while. And again, that can differ depending on what it is, but you're trying to establish new patterns. You're trying to reprogram your brain and the relationship of your ego and your soul. I mean, just it takes time.
Yeah,
It's well
definitely.
worth it, right?
Yeah. I found like I did my first experience in December and then it was so great in healing, but I came back and my wife didn't experience this, and so she had no concept of what I had just gone through. And I came back like, I'm changed, I'm fixed. And, it was right back to but no, you're not. You're still you. You're not going to go for, a week and fix yourself, And so I kind of slid back into well, I guess I'm just going to go back to who I was and stop doing the practices, stop doing the meditation, stop working out, stop cold plunging, all that shit that you need to do to keep on your healing path, and it's not going to fix you overnight. I mean, it'll help for sure, but she went down and did it. And so now she understands. She's done it twice now. So, and she came back like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I totally didn't understand what you were going through. And so,
That happened a lot.
yeah. So
With
you need to have a community of like-minded people if you're going through this. Do not isolate. Like, you have to talk to people, have a coach, have a guide, find a community. Yeah, it's so helpful. I love what you're
yeah,
doing.
thank you. I would also say that our families, our tribes are like such amazing teachers, right? I think there's a Buddhist anecdote or quote about you can think that you're enlightened until you meet up with your family, right? And then everything that is actually at the core of what triggers you and hurts and all that stuff probably will be brought up again. So it helps to contextualize it as I'm just teaching, right? And reminding. It doesn't feel like that at the time. My daughter does it to me all the time.
Kids
Like
are
good. Yeah.
they're great teachers, and your family's a good teacher because they bring you back to earth a little bit sometimes. Because I can get off into the ayahuasca cloud sometimes. It's like, no, life, there's still life. You still need to work and pay your bills. And, so it's just a real balance you got to have in life. And it's a practice, it's not a one-time thing for sure.
You get to enjoy it, right?
Well, you got any extra advice for us or got anything you want to add to the conversation before we wrap this up?
Great question. I've really been digging into this cultivate listening lately. And what I might add to that is that it really helps to inhabit your body to do that. I think that's why we were given the senses that we have. And what I mean by that is we are not our bodies, and we, sort of divine light that's in all of us in these bags of skin and bone, like can be all over the place for any number of reasons. Trauma is a really good one, right? We might be very used to dissociating. There might be a tremendous amount of pain. Our nervous systems might still really be learning how to regulate. So actually grounding in your body and taking on those practices really, really helps with being able to hear all the kinds of wisdom and messages from spirit, from the plants, from nature and the universe. And pleasure is another way that we can really connect with that. So my invitation is to orient yourself towards that. It's not just about gratification. It's about sort of your relationship with how you feel, how you sense, and how you are an energetic, integrated being in this world. So have fun with it.
Right on. Well, I sure appreciate your time. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for helping veterans, especially, and just people and humanity in general. Like, we need it right now. I mean, I feel like there's a major spiritual battle going on out there right now. And I think there's a lot of light coming to this world, and you're part of that. And so I really appreciate you. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us and spread your message.
Thank you so much for having me and for being in the work with me.
Absolutely. My pleasure.